Good morning and afternoon and day, depending on where in the country you are. We are expecting a pretty full room today, so I'm going to vamp for a few moments here while attendees roll in. So welcome. Really excited about this panel today. I'm going to keep vamping and BSing a little bit while the room fills in so that more people can actually hear a little bit of substance. And it's only going to be a little bit of substance for me, and then we're going to quickly turn it over to our esteemed panel. Also, welcome to those of you tuning in via Facebook. If you're there, it may be because you couldn't quite get into Zoom. We are expecting a pretty full room today. We'll see. It's always a question of who's going to register and who's going to attend. But of course, this will be recorded. So for those of you coming in that perhaps can't stay for the duration, we will be releasing this in about a week or so with post-production and little graphics and things. So if you miss any parts of it or were wondering what Cherie said in that moment, or Joe or Bob or Harry, we've got your back. We will have it for you. All right, so that's enough vamping. I'm probably setting some kind of record for saying the word vamping. So welcome, everybody. This is the first in our series of Cannabis Sustainability Symposium events here in 2021. This is our 6th year of producing these events. They started in partnership with the City and County of Denver and the Denver Cannabis Sustainability Working Group, and have grown into a series that we put on multiple times a year, discussing the most important issues in cannabis as they relate to sustainability, environmental issues, and the like. So my name is Ben Gelt. I am the chairman of the Cannabis Certification Council. Very proud to be here. I want to quickly thank some of our sponsors, and for those of our sponsors listening, if I don't mention you, it's not because we don't love you, it's because I just don't want to take up time saying the names of companies. So quickly, really must thank Boveda, HXE Partners, Hawthorne GC, Grodan, Gannett Fleming, Fluence, Marijuana Business Daily, Stanley Brothers, Sauna Packaging, Silver Bullet Water Treatment, Bonafides Laboratories, Solar Therapeutics, our great friends at Legal Services here in Denver, Stowe Responsible, Earthly Labs. We could go on and on and on. We cannot do this great work where we pull together these wonderful experts and thought leaders without the support of those partners and sponsors. So thank you to all of you for your support. Some quick news, and then we'll get right into it. We've got our new website coming out, so keep an eye out for that. It will be refreshed and I think looking great, cannabiscertificationcouncil.org. We also are doing an amazing amount of content this year, so please be sure to tune in for our sponsor Q&As. Next one is coming up on February 24th with Ernest Toney from BIPOC Can. I'm really excited about what Ernest is doing with that organization, and very pleased to be featuring him. Again, that'll be February 24th. We've got another one on March 18th with Grodan, and we'll be doing a special Earth Day Cannabis Sustainability Symposium series event on April 23rd. So please be sure to tune in for that. With that, I want to introduce my good friend, Claire Erickson from Boveda, our title sponsor this year for the symposium events. Claire, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your ongoing support, your time, your energy. This is an incredibly thoughtful and productive human being. And for those of you lucky enough to know her, I hope you share my sentiment. So good morning, Claire. Hi.
Good morning. Thank you, Ben. Those are all really kind words. I take that to heart coming from you. So thank you so much. Good morning to everybody else, or afternoon, depending on where you're at. As Ben said, my name is Claire, and I get the privilege to work with Boveda to save the terps. Boveda is really honored to support the Cannabis Certification Council and all their initiatives to promote sustainability, promote education, equity, and those quality best practices within the cannabis space. If you're not familiar, Boveda is a two-way humidity control that forms a terpene shield to protect the flavors, aroma, and effects of cannabis that we all love. We use a patented solution it's just made of an all-natural saltwater solution that forms a monolayer of pure water vapor around trichomes, essentially locking terpenes inside those trichomes until they're ready to be experienced. So again, thank you to Ben and everybody at the council just for continuing to elevate important conversations such as this. And with that, I will throw it back to the esteemed Mr. Ben Gelt. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Claire. And yeah, save those terps. Check out our Happy Plants episodes through the council. You can find that at cannabiscertificationcouncil.org. But now we are going to dive into, I think, a really important and substantive issue around sustainability. We're going to be discussing the energy mandates that are going to be going into effect in California starting in 2024. We have a wonderful panel, including Cherie Franklin, CEO of Urban Design Centers, Bob Gunn, founder and CEO of Synergy, Joe Sullivan from Cultivate EO, and Harry Etra from HXE Partners. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Harry, and I thank you all so much for being with us. And Harry, take it away.
Great. Well, appreciate that, Ben, and excited to be here today for this conversation around energy mandates. I have the privilege of being the moderator, so to help guide this conversation among this group. And really our plan for today is to kind of give an overview of what's happening in California and other markets, and really kind of get feedback from the experts that we have on this panel from their experiences and perspectives as to where things are going as it relates to energy mandates for the cannabis sector. So with that, just a little bit of background, HXE Partners, we're a sustainability and environmental social governance advisory firm. So we work with companies to help them think about how they can comply with energy regulations, sustainability mandates, and communicate what they're doing around environmental, social, and governance best practices to investors and other stakeholders. So excited to be here with this group. And, as we kick it off, Joe's gonna introduce himself, talk through some of the latest updates of what's happening in California. Bob has prepared some slides as well that he's going to talk to, the work that he does and his perspective. And then, really excited to have Cherie talk about her perspective, as a grower, operator, thought leader in this space on what this all means for her. And really for the audience today, we encourage you to put questions into the chat. If you don't ask questions, we have many prepared questions ready to go, but would love to hear your thoughts and perspectives and make sure we can integrate that into the conversation. So as we get going, want to hand it over to Joe to kick things off.
All right, thanks, Harry. Thanks everybody for coming out today. I'm going to attempt to share my screen, and you know what? It says host is disabled participant screen sharing. So if we could get that fixed real quick, that would be great. In the meantime, my name is Joe Sullivan. I work for Cultivate Energy Optimization. We work with utilities and governments and growers around North America to help support energy efficiency and indoor ag. And so here we go. I think good here. All right. Does everybody see my blue and green slide here? Yep, we're good. Okay, fantastic. So I'm a part of a group that's called the Codes and Standards Enhancement Team. The acronym is CASE Team. And we're supported by a group of 5 utilities in California: PG&E, SDG&E, SoCal Edison, LADWP, and SMUD in Sacramento. And the goal is to support the California Energy Commission and its efforts to update California Energy Code. And specifically, our team is focused on controlled environment horticulture, so indoor plant production in greenhouses and warehouses. And that's all plants, not only cannabis. And let me see, there we go. All right, so we started way back in, summer of 2019, developing potential codes for inclusion into the California Energy Commission's Title 24, Part 6 Energy Code. And so we interviewed countless producers, subject matter experts, and hosted a couple webinars to take feedback from the industry. And so over, since 2019, We've spoken to over 100 California stakeholders regarding CEH, or Controlled Environment Horticulture code proposals, to get their feedback and incorporate their feedback into our proposed codes that we have provided to the Energy Commission. Additionally, we hosted, multiple roundtables that included subject matter experts and growers from around California. And so I thought it would be good to just kind of review, what the code proposals are currently, and what triggers growers or CEH operators to have to abide or adopt these codes. And so there's two categories here. There's new construction and what we would call major renovations. So any codes right now that are proposed would not go into play until January 1st, 2023. So there's just about 2 years before these codes would go into effect. And that's for newly constructed facilities, so from the ground up. And then we have another category, major renovations. So codes would apply to growers that are replacing 10% or more of their lighting system, or expanding their existing lighting system by 10% or more. So only newly installed lighting would be subject to any codes we're going to go over here. So, if you're changing your lamps or your ballasts or your drivers, those would not be subject to any energy codes. And then if you're, let's say you're buying you're a grower and you're purchasing a warehouse and you're converting that into a CEH or a grow facility, that would trigger what's called the occupancy classification change for a building. And so in that case, you would also be subject to any of these codes that are going to follow here. And so we have a couple categories. We have lighting, dehumidification, and we have some greenhouse code cleanup. So if you're replacing any of your dehumidification systems, you would be subject to energy codes, or if you're converting, let's say, an unconditioned greenhouse to a conditioned greenhouse, and I'll get into what those definitions are in a little bit here. But again, existing facilities are not affected by any of these code requirements. So if you're a grower, and you're operating right now, and you're going to be operating the same way January 1st, 2023, you will not be required to switch out any of your equipment or abide by these energy codes. Okay, so our first category here, big ticket item, is horticulture lighting. And we have two categories. We have greenhouse and indoor. We've proposed a minimum efficacy of 1.7 micromoles per joule for greenhouses and a 1.9 micromole per joule minimum efficacy for indoor grow facilities. And I'll just shoot through these real quick. I know there's a lot of text here, but the lighting codes would only apply to facilities with 40 kW or more of total connected horticultural lighting. So if you're a small grower, right, you have less than, let's say, 20 lights or something like that, you would not be subject to these codes, even if you were, let's say, building a new facility or whatnot. So as I said, all horticulture luminaires, so any light used for plant growth, needs to be rated at a 1.9 micromole per joule PPE. And then, the same goes for lamps. So any fixture with removable lamps or whatnot would have to hit that 1.9 micromole per joule. And you know what? I realized I wanted to throw a couple links in for you guys. And so let me figure out how to do that real quick.
And we can probably, Joe, you could probably send them after when Bob's comments
Yeah.
to put those in there.
Okay.
Keep it going.
Yeah. Yeah, because I'm only seeing Q&A right now.
Sure.
I'm not seeing the ability to. Okay, cool. All right, and then horticulture lighting for indoor growing needs to have time switch or multi-level lighting controls. And actually the same goes for greenhouses as well. Let's see here. Yeah, and then you'll also need, sorry, I dropped my phone here, that monitors your horticultural lighting load. So, similar to any of your, let's say, Boveda controls or any standard wall controller there. All right. And we'll jump into dehumidification real quick. And again, this is for indoor growing, so warehouse type grows. It applies for only newly constructed facilities or brand new HVAC or dehumidification systems in existing facilities. So if you have standalone dehumidifiers, you need to meet the minimum integrated energy factor that's laid out by the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 10. And those minimum requirements are 1.77 liters per kilowatt hour for units with 8 cubic feet or less in capacity. Then if you have 8 cubic feet or more in capacity for those individual units, they would need to be 2.1 liters per kilowatt hour. And then in terms of HVAC, if you have an integrated system, so a system that package unit that dehumidifies and also cools, you'd be required to have on-site heat recovery to achieve dehumidification reheat. Or if you have a chiller system, you would also need to have on-site heat recovery to achieve dehumidification reheat. And then beyond that, if you're able to have a solid or liquid desiccant dehumidification system, if you don't have a standalone or an integrated unit or a chiller system. And then in terms of reheat for those two categories, the integrated HVAC system or chilled water system, your on-site heat recovery system must be designed to fulfill at least 75% of the facility's annual reheat needs. And then real quick, CEH facilities are exempt from standard prescriptive requirements in Title 24 to install air side economizers. And we received a lot of feedback from growers and stakeholders that air side economizers just don't really apply to indoor grows. There's significant biosecurity concerns and whatnot. So if you are enriching with CO2 to promote plant growth, you are exempt from that standard air side economizer code. And for greenhouse lighting, similar to indoor lighting, but the requirement is 1.7 micromoles per joule. Same thing for luminaires with removable lamps. And then you need the same time switch or multi-level lighting controls and similar controls that monitor your lighting load. And so as we were working through our proposed codes, we realized that the existing Title 24 codes for greenhouses had some issues. There were some compliance issues regarding the definition of greenhouse and what was required or not. And so we kind of embarked on a code cleanup mission. And so greenhouses with less than 10 BTUs per square foot of heating or less than 5 BTUs per square foot of mechanical cooling are what's called a non-conditioned greenhouse. So if you exceed any of those two metrics there, you are considered what is a conditioned greenhouse. And so conditioned spaces originally had to meet standard non-residential building envelope requirements. But as we know, greenhouse greenhouse envelopes are much different than your standard office building or hospital or whatnot. So, our goal was to develop appropriate requirements for greenhouse construction and figure out the best compliance path for new greenhouses. So what we decided on is that if a greenhouse would be considered conditioned, if a greenhouse is considered conditioned, it needs to meet some requirements for insulation or U factor. So if you have a opaque wall and roof assembly, it needs to meet requirements 120.7 and 140.3A. And I'll link some info on that, when I'm able to throw some things in the chat here. But non-opaque wall assemblies need to have an average U factor of 0.7 or less. And then non-opaque roofs need to have a weighted average of U factor of 0.5 or less. And that's a review of the code language as it is right now. You can find more info at Title 24stakeholders.com. There's my information right there as well. These slides will be available to everybody, and I'll throw some links in the chat where you guys can get some more information. But that's kind of the high level here, and I know some of our other panelists here are probably chomping at the bit to provide their opinion as well. So I'll turn it over to them, and happy to answer any questions as we go here.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Joe. I think, it's good sort of level setting. So, everyone understands what's happening with, Title 24 in California. And again, as part of this conversation, we've already seen some questions start to come in. So I encourage others to put in questions, and, we'll be talking about California. Again, we'll be getting some different perspectives, from this group, and then, be zooming out as well as it relates to what's happened in other markets, what are the implications for cannabis nationally. So with that, want to hand it over to Bob to sort of introduce himself and what he does, and his thoughts on stakeholder engagement, specifically Title 24, some trends and what's happening, and then we'll introduce Cherie, who will talk more about her perspective on what's going on. So Bob, you want to share your comments?
Yeah, thank you, Harry, for queuing that up, and thanks, Joe, for setting the table on what we're looking at going forward for Title 24. I'm waiting for my screen sharing participation rights, but in the meantime, thanks for having me. My name is Bob Gunn. I run an energy efficiency company based out of Seattle area, Washington, and we advocate for growers, in getting access to energy efficiency funds and grant writing for carbon funds. We've done that up in British Columbia, for example, energy electrification incentives. We help connect them to funding sources to help them invest in energy efficiency and invest in their businesses. Oh, great. I got screen shared now. Excellent. So we've been working in the energy efficiency space for about 13 years and in the cannabis space since 2015, wholeheartedly. And we've done a bunch of projects, primarily with grow lights, but some HVAC, increasingly these days, some HVAC and dehumidification incentives. We've become involved in energy policy because we've seen how really, good energy policy creates a good opportunity for folks. So I'll start off by saying I'm okay with where the Title 24 policy is as it's proposed today. I'm glad they I think it took a lot of work to steer the ship onto something that I think is workable for the grower community. And it required us I got involved in last summer when I realized, none of my clients or even any of the, farm bureau type groups or greenhouse operator associations, cannabis and non-cannabis, were really engaged in the process. So I had to come out kind of vocally and criticize how I saw the policy unfolding. So I will offer those critiques. But I will say I'm a big fan of market transformation, but also of the scientific method. So I'll say some theoretical. Let's start. For starters, I'll just take a moment to say, in my opinion, I think good energy policy is data-driven. It's modeled and stress tested at a systems level, right, with measured inputs and tested outputs. There's scenario planning, sensitivity analyses. We have to look at feedback loops and take back and substitute activities. And this is my energy efficiency experience at the utility level, as well as just being an economist. I need to know if we squeeze something here, it's not going to pop out over here. We want to understand market responses and unintended consequences. So that to me is important for going into any proposed policy, energy otherwise. I think stakeholder engagement really needs to be those impacted. I mean, I'm not really a stakeholder in this. I'm not a grower. I have a professional opinion on some of these things, and well, I'll get to the criticisms later, but in a nutshell, I want to see in any new policy, California or elsewhere, the stakeholders, people being affected, to be a seat at the table early and often. I think transparency and buy-in is important. That has to do with data. I think energy policy should be technology agnostic, and I think it should be crop agnostic. Those are, again, these are all my opinions. Everything I say here is. So a proposed policy approach in general, this is a little bit redundant. That's the problem. Here's maybe a solution. I think is collecting lots of data, real data about foundation. We call this baseline, as often in the utility world. You know, what are people using now, and what's the actual energy profile now, with real data, not conjecture when it's something this big. I think so. Policy proposals that I think would fly pretty well in the cannabis space and indoor agriculture is energy use disclosures. It's something the real estate market does, and by disclosing energy use simply, not saying how much you can use it, just disclosing it, it leads to accountability and leads to engagement. I think a lighting fixture inventory is something that's sorely needed in the indoor agriculture space, and people haven't done utilities and policymakers, even like Energy Star type policymakers, haven't invested in that yet. I think maybe because it's been so closely associated with cannabis, but we can't. I don't think we can make really good energy decisions till we know where our starting point is. I think considering offsets like renewable energy credits and carbon offsets, excuse me, I dropped my pen, is a great proposal. And we've seen a nice precedent in like Boulder County when they had essentially some renewable energy credits that led towards positive energy engagement. And progressive regulations, like Joe said, you know, give the small guys a break. The more you use, maybe the more regulations you have. And again, stakeholders need to include those affected. I also have some hypotheses, and here's where my cynicism is going to come through, and I'll relate this to what I saw going on in California, at the risk of offending anyone listening. One hypothesis is that electrical efficiency does not necessarily mean energy efficiency. Does not necessarily mean production or economic efficiency. And I'll talk mostly about lighting for the remainder of my comments. We've seen California come out strong with this proposed 2.1 micromole per joule. Joe shared the 1.9 at the bulb level, but that's where we ended up after, I'd say, a bit of arm wrestling. But 2.1 micromole per joule, that's code for killing HPS, double-ended HPS. Like no way it would meet it. And I think the feedback from growers were that's great. It might produce photons with fewer electrons, but I might not get the uniformity or the yield or the terpenes or the results that I and my investors need, and it's going to throw their business models and their viability upside down. So that economic efficiency and production efficiency wasn't necessarily linear. You could squeeze a little bit. You could squeeze one of the inputs for their business model, but if the output is affected, then we can't just assume lowering the wattage is progress. It needs to be tested. Also, I have this hypothesis that premature regulations can lead to a race to the bottom. It's not difficult to create and white label a light fixture that would satisfy DLC requirements, for example. Cost a little bit of money, anyone could do it, but it won't necessarily grow good plants. It won't be an appropriate spectrum. It won't have the uniformity that growers need to succeed. And I think premature regulation that's not really tested, doesn't have the ramp rate in for growers to understand how to grow with new technology, would flood the market with lesser quality products than what's available today. And as such, it would stifle innovation. It would lead to gaming. We haven't touched on, Massachusetts and Illinois regulated energy policy first with a 36 watts per square foot and other similar clauses. So different than the micromole per joule, but I would say it just led to a lot of confusion, and folks, and the enforcement of that is uncertain. The energy savings are uncertain, and just it's kind of lots of gaming and enforcement dodging happening there. I think the uncertain energy impacts have to do with that systems approach. If we don't really measure the output and the feedback loops, I don't know that we really understand what the energy impacts are. And also, without knowing the baseline, we don't really know where we're starting today. We can just guess, but these are big numbers being thrown around. So database policy, again, I believe in transparency and accountability. I think that will lead to buy-in. Showing your math, I think, if everyone can see the math and understand it a little bit better, that leads to great buy-in. This last number 4 is kind of a little tongue in cheek. I think science matters. We heard some regulator people, I'm not going to call anyone out, say things literally like light is light and photons are photons. And, I could hear the groan throughout my grower colleagues just say, no, that is absolutely not true. So that kind of discredited some of the policy proposal makers. And lastly, I think regulated markets, non-illicit markets, will use resources more responsibly. And with that in mind, I want to not create more barriers to entry to this regulated market, especially in California. So much of the market is believed to still be illicit. And if it's going to be, I would like to welcome people into the energy market where the energy use, among other things, can be done in broad daylight. Then we can engage around good energy policy and improvements. So what happened in California? I've already kind of set the table for that. I pretty vocally and publicly questioned the energy savings model. I thought the systems model was not specific enough, and the outputs were not measured. There was a big assumption that we can change the lighting source and yields and everything in marketability and terpenes would be totally unaffected. And the PPE alone may not save energy per yield. That's kind of similar. I'll try not to read this too much. Stakeholder engagement did lack grower input. I was included, but I'm not really a stakeholder. I'm a professional witness, if you want. I can talk about how I think markets should be transformed, but the growers weren't engaged. We started to do some webinars in June or July of last year in partnership with like the UCBA, some of the bigger trade associations that got the word out to the growers. And the feedback from the growers was, whoa, this is going to really upset things if we need to change course. So LED in 2023 was too much too fast. Not that every grower I talk to, I think, believes it's the future, LEDs, but there needs to be transition, with the genetics and their SOPs and everything. Renewable portfolio standards are already being enforced by CalCan for the marijuana industry, which is, I'm not against that, but it's an interesting precedent I've never seen. Typically electric utilities are subject to renewable portfolio standards like SB 100, but in this case, they just took that language and applied it to the marijuana industry. So it's another form of a tax, one that I don't think is egregious, but there's already things in play to enforce some resource responsibility. And then some of the early dehumidification HVAC rules really lacked credibility, proposing desiccants and system level AC systems only. I think the feedback from, the current round of proposals is fine, but I think some of them just didn't pass muster with the growers. We saw Illinois put some funny language about use of mini splits in there that really had people scratching their heads thinking that's just not appropriate at scale. So anyways, I think it's fine where we landed there. My last slide is a little interactive. I want to illustrate a little bit of play-by-play, because when this would be a market saturation chart or market transformation chart where we have the fixture efficiency along the x-axis on the bottom, going from least efficient, fluorescence, single end and metal halides and HPS, to more efficient, like double-ended HPS and CMHs, and then of course LEDs furthest to the right. Now the red line illustrates what's the market saturation. We don't really know. Department of Energy has characterized. Again, they talked to people like us to say what percent of the market do you think is LED. It's not the same as 1,000 data points of real data, but I think it's safe to say we think somewhere in the 5 to 10% range is LEDs. So from a market transformation policy standpoint, cutting out everything below that, which was initially proposed at the 2.1 cutoff, is pretty aggressive. I've seen it usually in other market transformation things, whether it's appliances or heat pumps and energy codes, we cut off the bottom, I don't know, I'll say 10 or 20% and inch up the regulation. We don't cut off the bottom 90, we don't cut it off at the knees. So that it was proposed at 2.1. micromole per joule or PPE cutoff. And for greenhouses, it was proposed at 1.7. After some, I'd say better stakeholder engagement and lots of conversations. I had many conversations with the CEC and the case team. They did come down to this 1.9 PPE at the lamp. I think an important thing for growers to know is the at the lamp is very important language. And the lamp is the bulb in lighting terms. So if it's at the lamp, then you have of 1.9, the efficacy of the fixture might be a 1.7 or so, but that will double-ended should qualify under this new rule. So that's the takeaway there. So I think it's fine where we landed. So there, I offered a couple of my criticisms. I'll turn it back over to Harry and everyone else.
Well, thanks so much, Bob and Joe, for kind of getting us going. Wanna really talk about the implications of what's here and kind of the process where we're at, and get Cherie's perspective on sort of an operator, grower involved in so many facets of this space. I'd love to hear a little bit more for the group, what you do and what this means to you. What are the trade-offs between efficiency and affordability? How, as an operator, this really plays in. So Cherie, I'll hand it over to you to give your thoughts on what's been shared so far.
Thank you, Harry. Well, I'll say that just thinking through what Joe and what Bob has presented, you both presented two ends of the spectrum of what happens on the ground, right? So Joe, you presented all the technical aspects of the regulations, and then how they're to be interpreted by growers. And I was thinking as I was listening to you is that we needed that guide, the dummy's guide to how to do this, right? And one of the things that happens is we can't compare those regulations to products. I cannot tell you, well, I'll start with who I am, I guess. Urban Design Center, we are developers here in Los Angeles. And we started off in affordable housing development, working with nonprofits to build housing on Central Avenue with a local nonprofit, as well as helping to train other people in this field. And one of the very first projects that I worked on with our contractor, Kurtom Dunsmuir, as well as the HVAC subcontractor was Loomis Air. And we actually won one of the first energy efficiency awards from DWP for coming up with implementing a dual coil system to conserve energy. So ever since that time, that was in 1990, I've been very interested in how do we make sure that projects within our communities are on the front line. I am a founder of Boveda Incubator. It was something that we put forth as part of our Think and Grow Lab accelerator hub that I formed with Danny Shaker. And we started looking into cannabis and how do we make sure that social equity applicants had a fair opportunity to get licensing. We went to Lacey, the Kretz Innovation Center, and said, hey, we need to be here. We need to be part of what's happening at Lacey to make sure that when cannabis comes on board and when social equity applicants actually establish their facilities, they are ahead of the curve. There's no sense in putting forth development and redeveloping spaces and not being very clear on how to sustain those operations. So that was one of the first things we did. We went to work with and promote workshops around sustainability and development at Lacey, which was very, very interesting. Out of that came many efforts. I cannot tell you how many times we were called and said, we have a solution, and we'd get in our car and we'd run out to see some Willy Wonka lighting system that somebody had created to make sure that there was sustainability. All kinds of contraptions, honestly. Ones that used water, some that had tubes that go outside of the building, and just people trying to figure it out. And then you go back to the city and you go back to the state, and what we found was that there was no connectivity. There was no connectivity to really help and guide people. And at the same time, they were under pressure to get things going, to submit your plan. How many lights are you going to have? Well, you know that if you have the high pressure sodium lights compared to LED, you're going to have a totally different number of lights. So you have to make these real-time decisions in the middle of an application process as to what is your lighting plan going to look like. How do you know that, what you spoke about, Bob, is it really going to work? Is it really efficient? Because we're coming out of a legacy grow environment where people did not have this kind of data. So do we take a chance? Do we make an investment in LEDs now without having any understanding of what the output's going to be, the quality, and whether or not it's actually going to save any energy at the end of the day? Here in South LA, many of our buildings are old. Our GoVerde incubator, which is over 100,000 square feet of space, we're in about 30,000 square feet, and we actually have some satellite spaces. But the buildings were built in the early 1900s. It's part of the Goodyear track, very old buildings without a lot of capacity for electricity. So we found ourselves also talking to DWP about upgrading all of our buildings. Now here in LA, and if anyone works on anything here, that process is very arduous here in the city of LA. You're not gonna get a new panel system and an upgrade anytime soon, so just forget about it. It can take up to 5 years. I've actually worked with the city on other projects like the Altasea project to look at a solar fit project so that you can actually generate your own energy and not have to rely on the city to begin to set aside the team and the time and the engineers to actually design what you need for your building. That is one of the fundamental problems that growers are up against. So with that timeline, many of them have gone to generators, and then they stick with what they have in terms of lighting, these hot lights, because they need to get up and going. They're paying a lot for rent. They are building out a facility. They are trying to meet deadlines, and they are trying to make sure they have quality product to get to market. Those are the real issues. Now you want someone to come and say, I have this light, I have that light. Most of them are being generated in China. We don't have any kind of local expertise on the ground to say, you know what, I've looked at that light. That's gonna work or it doesn't work. It's truly gonna give you that full spectrum lighting. So you have people who are now trying to be scientists to figure it out, buy a light, spend 2.5 to 3 times more on a light fixture on something that they have no understanding. So that's what's happening, and that's why there's pushback, I think, from growers in this market. I don't think that people don't want to do it. It's just it just isn't aligned with cost effectiveness at this moment. It's not aligned with timing on licensing. And there's also not enough expertise or testing or analysis to tell them they're going to get that good product. That's where we are. Now, given where we are, one of the beautiful things, we actually, we chided and we talked to all of our growers. We have 5 licensed entities in our GoVerde. We have GoVerde Incubator, which is in partnership with myself and Ujima Tribe and Chauncey Bullock. She's the CEO. And then we have Green Haven LA with Chauncey. We have Super Premium Can Corp, Emerald Dreams, and then we have Red Barn Farmers, run by Rashad Ali. Well, Rashad, he's been around for a long time and he knows cannabis. He is truly a master grower. And he said, yes, I'm going to try this. So at Red Barn Farmers is our incubated licensed social equity venture that is growing with LEDs. And I can tell you, we take tours of our facility. And I think during our prep time, I was taking a tour, and every single person was just amazed at the quality of the plant. And some people were able to experience it, and they hadn't had anything like it. Also, Ali has said that his light bill, his energy bills are pretty much 1/10 of what they would normally be. And the other thing that was really amazing, what we share with people is, when you can have that balance, then you definitely can have a different kind of HVAC system. You talked about the dehumidifiers and everything. Well, you can walk into these facilities, in his facility, and it's not hot. It's not going to have the sweating walls that create the mold and the mildew. And it's also going to be a place where you can have duality in terms of what's in the space. So we really want to offer a GoVerde Incubator, and we're so proud of Red Barn Farmers And because he's done that, I mentioned to you that we have over 100,000 square feet and we're in about 35,000 square feet. Now the other growers can see. So as Emerald Dreams is expanding from its 5,000 square foot space that he did include the high power sodium lights in, for that next 17,000 square feet, because he has a 22,000 square feet canopy, that next 7,000 square feet, he's like, okay, let's go LED. And that's really significant for that particular building because even as much as I work here in the city, I've been a consultant to many of the city departments, it is very difficult getting upgrades, and his building would require one. And I think now he feels comfortable. His investors feel comfortable. Our management team can say, this is a way to go, and you're not gonna end up putting in LED lights, having a poor crop, and not moving forward with all of the requirements to upgrade your power. And at the end of, you'll come out at the end and you'll have to start all over again. That's what people do not want to see happen. So we're very excited about this model concept that Red Barn Farmers has implemented. We welcome people to come and see. We'd love to be a test case for it. And I just wanted to mention one other thing. I was searching for, I was searching for the conference and I put in sustainability in cannabis. And I was really excited to come across a study, which is, well, not a study, it was actually a thesis paper. I haven't read the full thing, but I thought this is a kind of analysis and work we need, particularly at the university level. I'm currently on as an advisor to Cal State Dominguez Hills as part of the a grant that they received for studying cannabis and the impact on social equity. And this particular study, thesis is by Genevieve Yep, and it says a thesis quality research project submitted in partial fulfillment of their requirements, but it's sustainable cannabis policy in California, addressing the legal cannabis industry's carbon footprint. So I just wanted to say that and give this person a shout out, because this is the kind of interaction that we need to have by in between industry, education, the city, the government, and at the ground level, even at the supplier level, because we don't know what to pick. There's also trial and error around which type of light fixtures to choose. We need some kind of integration and ability to have people select and make a decision in real time.
Great. Well, appreciate that, Cherie, and everyone's kind of comments. And given that we have such a range of perspectives here, love to give you guys a chance to kind of react to each other's perspectives, and with an eye towards what are the opportunities moving forward in California and in other markets, examples of success that you've seen. So sort of open it up, for some dialogue among this group around, any comments on what's been shared so far, and then really looking forward in California and other markets, what have you seen as kind of success stories?
I'll mention one that I hinted at, and I wasn't involved in it, but when Boulder County early on, I think in 2015 or 16 or so, they required pretty much renewable offsets for cannabis growers. I think it amounted to like a 2.5 cent per kilowatt hour renewable energy credit tax, if you will. So maybe an extra 20% charge on your utility bill. And by and large, I think the feedback from the presenters from the county who I learned about this from firsthand, the growers were okay paying a little bit extra, right? Everyone liked the opportunity. It's kind of a syntax in a sense, but the money went into an advanced metering effort. So then the county would do, I want to say $6,000 worth of metering on site. So then they could see in real time what their facility was doing, and they could try to disaggregate the HVAC loads versus the lighting, and they can, then make it visual. Energy is not visual. And that led to, a good energy management relationship between the county and the growers. And I think they were okay paying the extra tax because it went towards something, that gave back to them and gave them some energy literacy along the way. So yeah, I think it starts with energy disclosure, measuring what you're using, and that's a really good first step towards then managing it.
I'd like to chime in. One of the other things, the Cal State Dominguez Hills is through the Merv Dimely Institute. They received a grant to study social equity impact on actual ability to create licenses. And one of the things we've talked to the cities about is some sort of benefit or special support for social equity applicants, and particularly around energy and lighting. So here in the city of LA, we have a policy to replace old lights with LED lights. So I thought, why can't the city also do that for cannabis? That would be something we could do. So far, I haven't received a no. However, the cost. So I'm trying to promote, and I'd love some support to see how we can expand those existing policies for helping businesses move to energy efficiency to the cannabis industry, and particularly for social equity applicants. And as part of our study with the Merv Dimely Institute, I'll look at these kind of policies, incentives, things that help social equity applicants be responsive to public policies and guidelines that we want to put forth, particularly around sustainability.
Yeah, and I have a couple comments in general, but just in terms of success stories, I mean, obviously this is my opinion coming from the California statewide case team, but honestly, I think our effort has been a success in the sense that, like Bob said, we started with the proposal, and we talked to hundreds and hundreds of stakeholders. We surveyed over 100 growers to develop our baselines and get a sense of what's actually going on the ground in California, and then modified our codes from there based on our feedback. And I think Cherie mentioned this, but and Bob mentioned it as well, but there is a high first cost for LEDs, and it could be burdensome to small growers, and on top of that, there's a lack of access to capital for cannabis growers as well. So, we had thought it would be best to kind of give the market a chance to adapt, and the growers to actually test, this technology and figure out how it works and do R&D. And so, in that sense, I think we settled on something that, at least for the interim is really going to work for the industry. And, I know I saw a question come up from Morgan regarding the 1.9 efficacy not necessarily providing market transformation right now, but realistically that 1.9 PPE standard cuts out pretty much all lighting fixtures besides some CMH and some double-ended HPS. So there is market transformation that is going on. But again, based on our feedback and talking to growers, we had decided that additional time to adopt technology and figure out how it's going to affect each individual producer would be the best route. And I'm just going to link our report here that we put together. It doesn't have the updated PPE numbers, and it's a 160-page report. So I don't expect anybody to read it. But Bob had mentioned showing our math and showing the economic analysis, and we have a pretty extensive economic analysis that was done. And just for lighting in general, we found after doing a market study and talking to producers and manufacturers that generally LEDs would have a 2.5 year payback, and that is only taking into account light energy and energy cost savings, right? Cherie and had mentioned how lighting affects production and whatnot, and that's not something that had gone into our analysis, but another reason why we wanted to kind of step back a little bit and gather more information. And again, we're open to receiving data from any growers. If growers are willing to come forward and provide production data based on their experiences, please. If anybody knows anyone or anybody's a grower out there, we are more than happy to incorporate that sort of info into our analysis moving forward.
Yeah,
Joe, we are more than happy to serve as a test case, pilot, whatever you would like. We have again, both traditional grow and also, so please come on down anytime. We'd love to have you. We also have, we are building we have 200 acres up north in Lower Lake County that we are going to have build out hemp, but a greenhouse for cannabis, and then also for a nursery. So would love to invite you there as well.
With what we've
Awesome.
talked on, in California, we're getting a lot of questions and comments of really sort of from the national perspective, looking at other kind of key markets. New York, who's currently considering legalization of recreational. You're looking at Massachusetts that has been a leader along with Illinois in this type of regulation. Sort of a broader question we've received around kind of statewide requirements of looking at the carbon emissions impact of different flower types. Happy to give some of my comments, but love to hear from the group as well. Will there be sort of labeling requirements? Certainly in the cannabis sustainability symposium and groups have been very involved in sort of the labeling front. Will we see leadership at the federal level is something that I think about. Bob touched on the real estate industry that has done a lot of this tracking and benchmarking for a long time. Often the universal tools are through the EPA. Energy Star has been around for 20 years, for example. And if you kind of have more states regulating and legalizing cannabis, how are you going to kind of have that comparison? And is it going to be ultimately a state responsibility? Will there be any type of federal leadership on being able to pull that together so you can compare performance across states, or sort of people are traveling across different markets, they understand the energy and environmental impact of what they're doing. So love to hear more from this group on how they see what's happening in California, what they see happening in other markets, and how you can have more standardization and labeling around these types of topics.
I have not seen any efforts to create like a food label, like a nutritional guide on the back of a cannabis package with regard to resource use. I'm all in favor of it. I think that would build the level of transparency, and maybe then consumers could, who are aligned with resource efficiency, could put their money where their mouth is. Right now, they don't have those options. And you mentioned Energy Star Portfolio Manager. That is a great tool that is a DOE funded tool. I've asked them to include some indoor agriculture, and it didn't go anywhere yet. But it is a tool that someone could start benchmarking. I think one thing I do appreciate that I think Massachusetts does require some facility level energy disclosure. I think that's a great first step. From there, we can start to correlate that with yields or lighting types, or do some subsampling like that. But it all starts with just like at Weight Watchers, you get on the scale and say, here's where I'm at today. You can benchmark yourself and at least then make personal goals about getting better, and use that for your marketing. Tell your customers what you're doing to manage your resource use. But I haven't seen policies incorporating that type of labeling yet.
And I believe, sorry, go ahead, Sheree.
I was just going to say that was one of the initial goals of Think and Grow Lab, was to create some type of labeling. And I want to share, Harry, we got our first Energy Star in 1990, because I'm old, right? So it was a while ago for a housing development. And I would say that one of the things that we could do, I mean, there's so many, why not just do it? I mean, Ben, you have a great organization. We need leadership, and that's where it all starts. I think, again, people want to enter into this business in a sustainable way. And here in California, we almost don't have a choice. We have our net zero energy policy by 2030 that all buildings, not just cannabis, have to abide by. So that, before we know it, that'll be here. It's 2021. It takes time. So I think cannabis can lead in this field because of its use, and then also the impact on our energy grid. It's just amazing. We should just step up and just create it and make it happen.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Illinois had incorporated energy reporting mandates into their legalization legislation. I'm not exactly sure how that's going at the moment, but I believe it was written into the legislation. So that's a start, right? And I think Derek from RII is going to speak next, but you know, some of their efforts with their power score and benchmarking and reporting, I think, you know, is you know, been a great start as well. But you know, obviously, more effort in this realm is needed across the board. And unfortunately, you know, we're not federally legal right now, so you know, states are and markets are extremely disconnected. And so, you know, something like a you know, nationwide benchmarking tool or standard, I think could help start to connect the dots.
Great. And you know, with the last few minutes, we're just gonna go a few minutes over, then I'll hand it back over to Ben. Would love to hear from each of you, you know, a few sentences, key takeaway, one message you'd want this group to take on, you know, energy mandates.
I'll go first. I would encourage anyone involved in a new market or even an existing one to try to identify who might be regulating them. It could be the Department of Health, the Department of Agriculture, Department of Corporations. You never really know. I think everyone is looking at a microscope at the energy use. So kind of show up and ask around and try to figure out, you know, where the table is, where people will be talking about these things, and offer what will work for you, and you know, offer your data if you have it. So that we're not just grasping for, you know, hypotheticals. So I'd say to the stakeholders, being the growers community and all the investors involved and supply chain actors, show up, you know, get proactive and go to these potential regulators.
I would say we also need to team up with the green build industry, especially for LEED certification leadership that's been around for a while now, looking at energy efficiency, building efficiency. We can partner. We're kind of in silos at this moment, but bringing those two together, I think, would help to advance understanding. And the other thing is, again, just if we could take the leadership from Bob and Joe and overlay it on product selection for growers and for cities and government agencies to understand how to actually get to the end user quickly. Would be very, very helpful. They do it now for many other things. Research reports, maybe we need more research reports at the building and safety on the different lighting systems. And they also have resources at the state. And I know the California Department of Food and Ag here is doing their own internal studies. We need to bring them further into the loop and get the consumer, which is the cannabis grower, more educated and give them the ability to assess in a quick way. Just like if you went to Home Depot and you went to grab a light off the shelf, they should be able to do that right now.
I just wanted to address a question real quick from Nicole here. She asked or commented incentives for outdoor growth or growing, grants for sustainable indoor practices, and carbon taxes for those who are not efficient. And you know, that kind of folds into the energy code discussion, right? Because you know, those types of things, you know, they take a while to develop, right? And you know, we're in a place right now with climate change, whether you believe it in or not, that you know, well, I guess in my opinion, we're in a dire situation. And so in order to move the market or any market quickly into that realm of sustainability and energy efficiency, you know, I think energy codes are one of the best ways to do that instead of waiting for the market to catch up. And you know, that's obviously people have a philosophical difference in opinion on that, but you know, from what I've found, is definitely the quickest way to get things done in that realm.
Great. And we had a lot of, you know, questions we weren't able to get to, but, you know, I, you know, appreciate the chance to talk with this group and your different perspectives. You know, for me, you know, on this topic, it's really about, you know, how do you bring together regulation, efficiency, social equity, and use sustainability as a tool to differentiate your businesses. So really appreciate your guys' time, and I'm going to hand it over to Ben.
Here I am. Thank you, Harry. Thank you, Bob and Joe and Cherie. This is not a simple conversation, as those of you who've been listening can no doubt surmise. And you know, to me, the big takeaway here is how critical a robust stakeholder process really is in setting these kinds of policy, and how challenging that is. It's not easy. And I'll just say, we at the council do our best to bring stakeholders to the table and bring a diverse set of views and voices to the table. And it takes a lot of work. So thank you again to Joe and Harry and Bob and Cherie. What a wonderful discussion.